This is a production of World Video Bible School. To God be the glory.
Hello and welcome back to another class on learning to use the Greek New Testament. Today we're going to talk about prepositions. But before we get into all the specifics about prepositions, I want to go over the vocabulary with you. So go ahead and take out your book and turn to chapter 8, and that'll be on page 57 in this particular edition. And if you'll notice, we'll bring up the words again on the screen. I'll pronounce them for you. And as we go through here, what I want you to pay attention to is the fact, and as we will talk about this more in detail, is that these prepositions, some of them have different meanings depending upon the case of the noun that follows the preposition that it accompanies. And so what you'll want to do is make a vocabulary card with the word, for example, dia on it, and then you'll have the meaning of it as it's found in the particular cases that are mentioned in the book. So you might end up having 2 or 3 different cards for the one preposition. All right, so let's take a look at the first word and pronounce it. Notice that it's the Greek word dia, which means through or by. When the noun that follows it is in the genitive case, the word dia means through or by. And of course our word diameter comes from that, as you can see on a circle, meaning through the circle. It means because of or on account of when the noun that follows it is in the accusative case. So it can mean through or by or because of. And so what you want to do is make 2 different cards for that preposition. All right, let's take a look at the next preposition. It's the word kata. All right, kata. And it means against or down when the noun that follows it is in the genitive. Or it may mean according to when the noun that follows it is in the accusative. Kata. All right, let's take a look at the next word. Meta. Meta. And when it's used with the genitive, it means with. And if it's used with the accusative, or if there's a noun that follows it, it's in the accusative case, it means after. In fact, the word metaphysics is kind of an interesting word in and of itself. In its earliest meaning, metaphysics just had reference to the discussion about physics that took place, or the discussion about existence that took place after the literature on physics. So that's how it got its name, metaphysics, because it was just the series of essays that were written in ancient Greek culture about existence and so forth. Then they were written after physics. So metaphysics is basically how the name came about. Let's take a look at the next preposition, peri. And that's the word about or concerning or for with the genitive. And then make you another card that says peri, that means around with the accusative. The perimeter is the area around a particular geometric figure like a square or something. Peri, perimeter. Okay, let's take a look at the next word. Huper. And notice a lot of these are words that we have in our own language that are just transliterated into our own language. It means for with the genitive and above or over with the accusative. For example, hypertension. Now, that word huper is pretty interesting. Hypertension. Tension, when we think about hypertension, we're talking about above normal blood pressure. There is pressure in our veins, in our blood system, okay? It's under pressure, and our heart pumps that blood through the veins, okay? When you have hypertension, you have above normal tension. Or children sometimes are referred to as hyperactive. Well, all children, typically speaking, are active, but then there are some who are hyperactive. In other words, above that which is normally active. So the word hyper is used a lot in our own language. All right, let's take a look at the next Greek preposition. Hupa. It means by with the genitive and under with the accusative. Okay? All right, let's take a look at the next one. And this is a preposition that's found with 3 cases, meaning upon, on or at or about with the genitive, dative, and accusative. You might find it in any of those particular forms. So on or at or about with the genitive, dative, and accusative. In other words, in just that order. On with the genitive, at with the dative, and about with the accusative. Our word epidermis comes from that. That's the skin. That's the outer layer skin. Epidermis is the skin that's on top of the skin. You know, our bodies have several layers of skin on them. You have an epidermis and you have a mesoderm. The mesoderm is the skin layer or the cell wall in between. Okay, in the middle, meso meaning middle, epidermis, epi meaning upon, the skin upon. So you can begin to see again where a lot of our English words come from. All right, let's take a look at the next word. Is epi, and then para. Para meaning from, and that's used with the genitive, and with when it's with the dative. Also beside or by when it's used with the accusative. Our word parallel comes from that word. So use 3 different cards there with regard to epi and para. All right, now let's take a look at some other prepositions that are used in one case. The word ana, and it means up, and it's used with the accusative. It's used with the accusative. And then the word anti is our next one. Anti, which means instead of or in place of, and it will always be followed by a word in the genitive case. Of course, the word antichrist, meaning against or in place of, someone who sets himself in place of the Christ. Then the word pra, meaning before, and it's going to be used in the genitive, okay, meaning before. And then pros, to or towards, pros, to or towards, with the accusative. We found with the accusative, a prosthesis. Our word prosthesis comes from that word. All right, let's take a look at the next word. Then the word sun, which means with, and it will be followed by a word in the dative case. In the dative case, our word synthesis comes from that word. Okay, sun. All right, let's take a look at the next word. Anagnosko is not a preposition, but it does have a preposition prefixed to the word gnosko, which means I know, but here it means I read. Anagnosko means I read. All right, let's take a look at the next word. Anoigo, which means I open. Anoigo. And then the next word, apathnesko, which means I die. And then the last word, ekbalo, which means I throw out or I cast out. Ek meaning out, balo means I cast or I throw. Okay, so those are the vocabulary words. Now, I want to also call your attention to the fact that there are other prepositions that you have learned in the past from the material that was presented in your book in chapter 5. At the end of chapter 5 on page 37, there were 4 prepositions there. They were apa, as, ek, and in. So don't forget about those prepositions, and you will be seeing them more and more. Okay, so that concludes the vocabulary section of this chapter. So now let's talk about prepositions in general. You know, I don't know if you've thought much about it, but that word preposition might be an intimidating word if you're not familiar with it. It sounds rather intimidating, but you know, those are words, prepositions are words that we use all of the time. They abound. The English language abounds with them. In fact, I really couldn't teach this course without the use of prepositions. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Take a look at the screen in this particular sentence. If I were at school teaching a class or something and I were working in the library, I might tell someone that above the 3rd shelf you will find books about the Dead Sea Scrolls and works concerning other aspects of Bible archaeology. Notice in that one sentence there are 4 prepositions: the word above, the word about, the word concerning, and the word of. Well, there are a lot of prepositions in the English language, and I'd like for you to take a look at some of those now. Let's look at them on the screen. The words about, above, across, after, against, along, amid, among, around, at, atop, before, behind, below, beneath, beside, between, beyond, but, as in the meaning of except, by, concerning, down, during, except, for, from, in, inside, into, like, near, of, and off, and on, onto, out, outside, over, past, regarding, since, through, throughout, to, toward, under, underneath, until, up, upon, with, within, and without. Those are a fairly exhaustive list of the prepositions that exist in the English language. In fact, some grammarians or some English professors might have you memorize all of those so that you'll just know what the prepositions are, and so that you can easily identify them as you're reading through various lessons. Well, prepositions in the New Testament and their significance cannot be, I think, emphasized enough. Like the English language, Greek abounds with prepositions, and they often have very important theological implications, some very, very important theological implications. So I want you to understand how important these prepositions are. And to help us understand, I want to share with you a couple of things about the use of these prepositions in our New Testaments. For example, in Acts 2:38, we have an example of a preposition that you might be familiar with. You remember in the context of Acts chapter 2 that the Apostle Peter was preaching on the day of Pentecost, and he preached about the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Christ. And when the people on that occasion heard that great message and the fact that they were guilty of sin, they were cut to the heart. Verse 37 says, and they cried out and they said, men and brethren, what shall we do? And in verse 38, Peter said this, repent and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Jesus Christ, for the remission of sins, and you shall receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. Notice that word for. That word for in Acts 2:38 is both in English and Greek a preposition, and it's the Greek word eis. Now, a lot of discussion has resulted and even debate about what eis means, because if it means what in fact it normally means in grammar, in defining eis, that it's for something in order to obtain, then that, you see, has important implications for what we believe about baptism and whether or not it is essential. Repent and be baptized. For what reason? In order to obtain the forgiveness of sins. Well, I know that there are some people who don't like that idea, but yet that's what the Bible teaches, and that Greek preposition for is so important, and yet every time, nearly every time when you read through the New Testament, I can't think of a single example where it means because of, but rather it means in order for, so that you might obtain the forgiveness of sins. It has reference sometimes to into or unto, in other words, to obtain. And so there is a great example of why we need to know something about these prepositions. Let me tell you about one other example. It's found in Ephesians chapter 2, and as I tell you about the context in just a moment, I'm going to let you see on the screen a verse that's very important. You remember how the Apostle Paul spoke about Christians who, he said, in speaking about their conversion, he says, you once were dead in your trespasses and sins, Ephesians 2 verse 1, but Christ made them alive. And then he goes down in the context and speaks about God who was rich in mercy and so forth, wherewith he loved us, and speaks about them being raised from the dead, which I believe is a reference to baptism. Well, when you come to Ephesians 2 and verse 8, he sort of sums all that up and says this. Notice it now on the screen. For by grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. Now notice there on the screen, the second part, or verse 9, not of works, lest any man should boast. Of is a preposition, both in English and in Greek. Now, the word of works there has led some people, in reading through that, who believe that we're saved on the basis of faith alone, to believe that works has nothing to do with our salvation. Well, let me say this. It is true that works in and of themselves are not the source of our salvation, but that verse doesn't teach anything about that works has nothing to do with our salvation. Paul was merely arguing in Ephesians 2 verses 8 and 9 that it is by grace that we are saved. He says, how does that come about? Through faith. Now, what kind of faith? Is it a dead faith? Is it a faith that doesn't respond to the will of God? No, James chapter 2, verses 14 and following, 14 through 26, speak about the fact that faith must express itself in obedience, that our faith is made perfect when indeed we do the will of God. But in Ephesians 2, verse 9, when Paul said, not of works, he used a Greek preposition that we have learned as ek. Ek, that was one of the prepositions you are to learn. And or one of the prepositions you are to learn. Ek means out of, out of. It often has reference to source. And so what Paul was saying there is the source of our salvation is not works in and of itself. Now that doesn't preclude works. It doesn't mean or that somehow that eliminates works. All Paul was arguing is that the source of it, the origin of our salvation, is not out of law in and of itself, not out of works in and of itself, but the source of our salvation, the origin of it, is God. It's the blood of Jesus. Who could argue about that? Not of works, lest any man should boast. Now, if I'm baptized, that's a work of God. He's telling me what to do. I'm not boasting about that. That's just something He's asked me to do in order that I might have salvation. And so you see that Greek preposition ek there, translated of in the New Testament, has reference to source or out of. So the source of our salvation, the origin of it comes from God. It doesn't come from me. I would never argue that. But again, that does not mean that I don't have a responsibility to follow through on the will of God and doing what He asked me to do. So that's just a sampling of the kinds of things that you can discuss and get into in regard to the use of these prepositions. Well, to encourage you a little bit more in how important these prepositions are, I want you to notice the following quote. Listen to it. This comes from Beyond the Basics, a Greek Grammar Beyond the Basics by Daniel B. Wallace. Notice what he says. He says, a proper understanding of prepositions is vital to exegesis. Many an exegetical debate has turned on the use of a particular preposition. One can gain some sense of the value of learning the nuances of the prepositions by noting their sheer number. Over 10,000 of them in the New Testament. Prepositions are so common that 4 out of 5 verses have at least one. 4 out of 5 verses have at least one preposition. Does that encourage you? Does that then spur you on to learn more about these prepositions? I hope that it does. By the way, the most commonly used Greek prepositions are the Greek prepositions in and ace. In, N is used 2,752 times. The Greek preposition ace, that was translated for in Acts 2:38, is used 1,767 times. And so you learn those 2 Greek prepositions, and you're well on your way to learning a good portion of the Greek New Testament. Thus, these Greek prepositions are very, very important, and they yield some wonderful payoffs in Bible study and in sermon class preparation. All right, now what do you need to know then about prepositions? What are the basic elements of this chapter? What are the major points of this chapter that you need to know, and some general information about prepositions? Well, let's answer the question first of all. Before we do that, what is a preposition? What is a preposition? A preposition is a word that links a noun, pronoun, or a word group acting as a noun, that is the object of the preposition, for example, to the rest of the sentence. And that's from the Little Brown Handbook, page 526. So in other words, it shows a relationship, okay? A preposition shows a relationship between a noun and another noun or pronoun or a word group acting as a noun in a sentence. For example, I have in my hand here my pointer that collapses down like a pen. And if I tell you that the pen is on the Bible, the word on is the preposition in that sentence. It's showing a relationship between the pen and the Bible. Now, if I said the pen is beside the Bible, what's the preposition? That's right, it's the word beside. The pen is beside the Bible. Beside, a preposition is showing a relationship between the Bible and the pen. Okay, if I said the pen is under the Bible, under is the preposition. If I say the pen is above the Bible, above is the preposition. And by the way, above the Bible is the prepositional phrase, and we'll talk more about that a little later on. Well, let me give you another definition, and maybe we could say it in a little different way to try to help further illustrate the point. Take a look at the screen now for our next definition. A preposition always has an object, which is usually a noun or a pronoun. The preposition establishes a relationship such as space, time, accompaniment, cause, or manner between its object and another word in the sentence. The preposition with its object and any modifiers is called a prepositional phrase. And so, again, notice that prepositions, and I quote to you from that one that we just looked at, has a relationship. Sometimes it's a space relationship, as the ones I was mentioning a moment ago with the Bible. Sometimes it's a time relationship. Sometimes it has reference to accompaniment or cause or manner. And then these prepositions have objects. And those objects then, along with the preposition, form what we call a prepositional phrase. Notice the following examples now of what I'm talking about in regard to prepositions and prepositional phrases. Look at this sentence. After the sermon, the minister walked slowly down the wide aisle and through the door of the spacious auditorium. Take a look at that for just a moment and see if you can identify the prepositions and the prepositional phrases. Okay, now let's take a look at this next slide and notice I have underlined the prepositional phrases. I have put in italics the preposition, and I have put in bold the object of the preposition. So here they are. After is our preposition, and then sermon is the object of the preposition. After the sermon is the prepositional phrase. So after the sermon, the minister walked slowly. The minister, of course, is the subject, and walked is our verb, and slowly is our adverb. Walk slowly down the wide aisle. Okay, down is the preposition. Aisle is, in fact, our object of our preposition. Wide just says is a modifier, so down the wide aisle, and then through is another preposition. Door is the object of that preposition. Through the door is the prepositional phrase. Of is the next preposition, and then auditorium is the object of the preposition. Of the spacious auditorium then is the prepositional phrase. So that'll hopefully give you some idea of what we mean by a preposition and a prepositional phrase. Now, that answers the question of what is a preposition. But now let's turn our attention to the Greek preposition. The Greek preposition. Let's spend a few moments talking about the Greek preposition. And what I want you to notice, number one, about the Greek preposition is that there are 17 basic prepositions. 17 basic prepositions. Now, all of which were listed in chapters 5 and 8 of your textbook, ones that by and large we went over today in class. Now, there are some basic meanings of these prepositions. And I'm going to go to a chart now that is found in a lot of grammar books that you'll see and read. It shows, again, in regard to spatial relationships. That's not special, but spatial, S-P-A-T-I-A-L, spatial relationships, to give a basic idea of what these prepositions mean. Okay? So let's take a look at that now. Notice here on this chart that you have this circle here that, and all these lines that so carefully illustrate the various usages of the preposition, like huper, which means over, okay? Pra, meaning before, and hupa, meaning under, kata, meaning down, all right, and apa, meaning from, pros, going toward, inside the circle, dia, across or through the circle, through, peri means about or around the circle, okay, epi, upon, ana, up, okay, para, beside the circle, and meta, after. So take a look at that. Maybe pause the video for just a moment and on still screen there so that you can look and see what those prepositions mean, at least in their basic meaning, so that you have some idea in a general sense of what those are all about. So those are the basic meanings then of those 17 prepositions. Okay? Well, let's notice number two then, that the Greek preposition has a single Greek preposition may have more than one meaning, And you've noted that by looking at the vocabulary list, and as we talked about that earlier in making use of those cards. Now, that meaning, okay, when we talk about having different meanings, the meaning is determined by the case that the noun is in that follows that preposition. The object of the preposition or the noun that follows it, whatever case it's in, that's going to help you determine the meaning of the preposition. That's why you have to pay attention to that case ending and know the meaning as it relates to that particular case. Well, for example, dia may be found with a noun in the genitive, and that means through, or it might be found followed by the accusative and would then mean because of or on account of. Now, on the other hand, epi is found in 3 cases. In the genitive, it means on. In the dative, it means at. And in the accusative, it means about. Okay, so a single preposition may have more than one meaning. Now, let's notice something else about a preposition. Number 3, it is not declinable. It is not declinable. Do you remember what that means? When we talk about declining something like a noun, its ending will change. It will fall away from the very beginning nominative case ending. Its ending will change depending upon the case that it's in. Prepositions don't do that. They stay the same no matter what particular meaning they have. And so that's one great thing that students like to hear about, is that they don't have to learn any more noun declensions with regard to prepositions, because it stays the same. Kata will always be kata, even though its ending, its meaning may be a little bit different. So it's not declinable. Then notice number 4. Notice number 4 now. The Greek preposition can be prefixed to verbs. And when that happens, then one of 3 things occurs. It will either intensify the meaning, okay, that it's prefixed to the stem. All right, when that preposition is prefixed to the stem, it'll either intensify the meaning, it'll complete the meaning, or it'll give an entirely new meaning. Let's take a look at the board here, for example, to show you what I'm talking about. If we look at this word gnosko, which means I know, all right, and we then prefix the Greek word epi, do you see it there, epi, to the word gnosko, it intensifies the meaning. So instead of it just being I know, it would be I have knowledge, or I know thoroughly, or I know upon, sort of like knowledge upon knowledge. I know thoroughly. And the difference is this in most cases. Now, there may be some exceptions in the Greek New Testament as you read through, but the difference is this. Gnosko sometimes has reference to sort of an academic knowledge. You might know intellectually about something. For example, how to drive a car. You might know how to do that. But you may not have a working knowledge or a thorough knowledge of it, an epignosko knowledge. That prefixed epi, that preposition epi prefixed to the stem sort of intensifies it. It's just like I can remember when my son Jordan was about 8 years old, and he wanted to drive the pickup truck that we had, and he saw his daddy pushing in the clutch and putting on the gas pedal and shifting the gears, and he thought he knew all there was to it. And so he wanted to drive, and so when he got a little older, I explained to him how to do it, and he had it in his head. He knew that he had to put his foot in on the clutch and let off on the gas and then shift gears, and then as he wanted to put it back into gear, he had to let off on the clutch and push down the gas about the same time. He knew that he was supposed to do it, but the first time he got it and he tried to do it, it just sort of did like this, and the car died on him. You see, he had an academic knowledge, he had a gnosko knowledge, but he didn't have a thorough or working or experiential knowledge. And so you see how the prefix of that, or the preposition prefixed to that particular stem intensified the meaning in this particular instance, epignosko. All right, the second part of this, we said not only do prefix prepositions intensify the meaning of something, but then they also can add something to the meaning. They can complete the meaning, as in the word ago, which means I lead, but then this preposition apa, okay, here ago I lead, apago, I lead away from. So now you can see how then it completes the meaning. Another example would be the word ekbalo, ekbalo. Balo meaning I cast or I throw, but ek would mean out, right? So I cast or I throw out. So the wonderful world of prepositions, you're going to notice those so much as you read through the Greek New Testament. And the exciting thing is you're going to be able to see them more and more. If you learn those Greek prepositions, you're going to be better at learning your own vocabulary in the English language. You'll be able to see medical terms and understand a little bit better about what those terms mean and what they're talking about because of your knowledge of Greek. And that takes place in a lot of different fields as well. I remember one time looking at some plans for a house, and on the side of the house it said monolithic pour regarding over the porch area. And I thought, what does that mean? I thought, oh, lithos means stone and monos means one, so one pour. In other words, it was to be poured at the same time as the rest of the foundation was. And I knew nothing about engineering or anything else. I just figured that out because of being able to know something about these Greek words. And so it's exciting to learn about these prepositions. Now, the third way that these prepositions can operate is when they're prefixed to a word and they change the word entirely. For example, the word gnosko, which means I know, as we had pointed out earlier, but then the word ana, which means up, gnosko, I know up? No, that's not what that means. Here it means I read. I read. Now maybe there may be some sort of history involved in being able to look up and reading. I'm not sure about that, but sometimes it doesn't quite always intensify. It doesn't complete the meaning, but it seems to give you a different meaning altogether in changing that stem. All right, so that's sort of one of three ways you'll find prepositions being used when they're prefixed to a particular word. Now, to further illustrate and to encourage you in how great knowing about these prepositions really can be, I want you to go with me now to a passage in the Bible, John chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. You can either look at it on the screen or get a copy of your own Bible and look at it there. But notice what the Bible says. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. In verse 4, in Him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Now that's the King James translation. Look at it. Comprehended it not. Now what in the world does that word comprehend mean? Well, we could look it up in an English dictionary. We might even look it up in a Greek dictionary or in a Greek lexicon. But if we knew something about the two Greek words that I'm going to show you here in just a moment, we could have a better understanding on our own of what that word means. Now, put this series of verses in context. That verse and those words were uttered during a time when a group of individuals known as the Gnostics had sort of infiltrated the church. And they had borrowed some ideas from various Near Eastern cultures and so forth, and had a philosophy that everything in this world that was physical was inherently evil, and the spirit was ultimately good, and there was this sort of struggle and this dichotomy going on. And then there were some references in terms of the origin of life, and that long before the creation, before the universe was established, that there was this struggle going on between darkness and light, between light and darkness, and they were at war with one another. And of course, we know that indeed those are symbols even in the Bible with regard to good and evil. All right, so they sort of took those terms and put them into the Bible and to their religious thinking, the struggle between good and evil. Well, you know those Gnostics, some of them taught that how the earth was created was that in this struggle between light and darkness, that a little bit of the light got captured inside of the darkness, and that evil then and that light going on there, that's what sort of began the whole series of emanations that created finally the earth and the universe and so forth. That's how they explained the existence of the universe, because you see, light couldn't have anything to do with evil, and yet they saw the world as evil. Well, notice how John says Jesus is the light. In Him was life. In the beginning was the Word. He was there before the foundation of the world. He created the world. And you know what? This whole idea that darkness capturing light being possible is not possible, because when He said, and the light, the darkness comprehended it not, that word comprehend comes from this Greek word right here, katalaben. Now, this happens to be, by the way, a stem changer from our second aorist verbs, lambano, to take or receive. Kata, what does that mean? Take down. Down, it means down. So literally, it could not take down. It could not capture. It could not take down the light. No, doesn't matter how powerful darkness is. Indeed, the light will overcome it in the end. Indeed, the darkness could not capture. It could not take down the light. And so you see that flies right in the face of Gnosticism. It refutes that strange Gnostic idea that was in existence many, many years. Well, if you knew something about prepositions, kata, then you would have known something about how to better understand that word. So you see how exciting it can be? Do you see how meaningful and how practical prepositions can be? Well, let's look at one other thing about prepositions before we get to our translation exercises. Let's notice this, that number 5, that prepositions, that they can undergo morphological changes when followed by a word that begins with a vowel. They undergo morphological changes when followed by a word that begins with a vowel. Here's what we're talking about. Now this is in your textbook, but I want to show you here again on the board. When you have, for example, the preposition apa, which means from, and then the next word that follows it is like, for example, adelpho, which means of brothers, right? Or of a brother. Here, this word begins with an alpha, doesn't it? It's a vowel. And when, in many instances, a word that follows a preposition, when it begins with a vowel, the last letter of the preposition just sort of drops off, and you get this apostrophe here to show you that that's what's happened. So as you're reading along, op just means apa, adelphu. Okay? That happens a lot, and you'll notice there's a chart, I believe it's on page 59 in your textbook, in this chapter, that shows you some of the rules and what happens. And sometimes those letters will also, this is called elision, sometimes those letters will also change. For example, a tau as an ant may become a theta, And you'll see those morphological changes depending upon if the word that follows begins with a vowel and if it has a rough breathing mark over it or not. But take a look at the textbook for more detail about that. All right, so let's review then what we have learned so far. Remember that a Greek preposition, there are 17 of them, 17 basic prepositions. Number 2, let's notice that a single Greek preposition may have more than one meaning. Number 3, it's not declinable. Number 4, it can be prefixed to verbs, and when it is, it can intensify the meaning, it can complete the meaning, and it can give an entirely new meaning. Or number 5, then a Greek preposition can go or undergo morphological changes when followed by a word that begins with a vowel, and you might add on to that, or a rough breathing mark as well. All right, so maybe that sort of boils it down for you in terms of what things you need to know about a preposition. Well, let's turn our attention now to some translation exercises. I'd like for you to turn in your book to this chapter on prepositions and go to the back and notice the sentences there and work through the odd-numbered sentences. Go ahead and turn the video off at this point and work through the odd-numbered sentences, and then we'll come back and work through those together. All right, welcome back. Hope you've had a chance to work through those sentences. I don't know if we'll get to all of them today in this session or not, but we'll work through several of them here. So let's start with number 1 and see if we can parse some of these words, these verbs, and begin to translate and figure out how to apply some of the things that we've learned so far to this point. Okay, number 1. Let's read it out loud. Anagenoske, ha mathetes, parabalein, peri tes basileas. Okay, I notice right away here's my verb and here's the subject of my sentence. Notice again that ha, that article is telling me this is the subject of my sentence. And remember, disciple is declined in a peculiar way. It's in the first declension nouns, and it is, even though it has that ace ending, it is in the nominative case and it's the subject of our sentence. That sometimes throws people off when they see that. But again, this right here, if you know those articles and know how they decline, you'll know this has to be, and you'll go, oh yes, I remember mathetes is declined because it's a masculine noun in the first declension groups, and it's declined therefore in the singular in sort of a peculiar way. But it is the subject, the disciple. Now I have to have a verb. What is the disciple doing? Here is my verb. He is reading, right? Oes a. So this is a present active indicative, third person singular verb. Gnoske. You might be tempted to think this is future with a sigma, but it's not because gnosko has a sigma in it, and we don't have a sigma here. It's just simply present tense. So the disciple is reading, okay, a parable, right? Reading a parable. Here's the accusative case. It's what's being read. Now notice, here is then the application of today's lesson. Peri tes basileos. Okay, peri is our preposition, right? And notice the words that follow are in the genitive case. Ain, right? Aas, aan. These are genitive. So when we find a genitive that follows this peri, it's going to have the meaning of concerning or about. Okay. Now, one of the temptations I want to tell you about at this point that some people have, and a little bit of confusion, is when they come to those genitive case nouns that follow a preposition, they ask the question, well, don't I insert the preposition of inside of there? Now you're catching on, because of is in fact a preposition that we supplied when it came to nouns that were found in the genitive case that oftentimes would show ownership or possession. We supplied a preposition. But now what's happening is the preposition in this case is being supplied, and so it takes precedence over whatever preposition we might have used before to substitute in the genitive case, or if it's the dative case 2 or 4. This preposition is what you follow. It is supplied with the preposition. So we don't need to supply of or anything else. You just read it like it is, see? So from, or about rather, concerning of the kingdom. So the disciple is reading a parable about the kingdom. About the kingdom. Here is our prepositional phrase right here, about the kingdom. About the kingdom, about ties us into, shows a relationship with the rest of the sentence, the disciple, reading, and so forth. Okay, well, let's take a look at number 3 then. Sentence number 3. Elaban, hi, agathai, agatha, apa, tu, pistu, adelphu. Now, this sentence is a little bit tricky, but I want you to take a close look at it and see if we can sort of work through it together. Now, as I look down through here, I say, okay, here's my verb. We'll come back to that verb in just a moment, because just the way that I do it, if you want to do the verb first, that's fine. It's just sort of a matter of preference. But I like to get that subject, and I see right here, hi, is in fact a nominative, plural, feminine article. And sure enough, it agrees here. So I look at that and I say, well, wait a minute, there's something else here on the end that looks similar, but it's not entirely similar because I don't have an iota here, do I? So you might be tempted to sort of put all of that together, and occasionally it may be that maybe you wrote the word down wrong and left off a letter. That could be it, but that's not the case or the situation here. Really, when you look at this, these here are in the nominative case. They are feminine, they are plural, and this is an adjective, isn't it? This is an adjective, meaning good. Now, what did I say? What gender is this? It's feminine, okay? So it's nominative, it's feminine, okay? And it's plural. It's plural. And the interesting thing is, since it is feminine, and it's an adjective, this adjective is being used in a substantive way meaning it's a noun. So this means the good women, the good women. And we didn't go over that in detail in here or on the tape, on the video, but it is in your textbook. Now, the good women, the good women. So this really doesn't have anything to do. It isn't even being used in a predicative sense or predicative sense because it doesn't agree. Okay, agreement is so important. So the good women, the good women. Now, if this would have been ha agathos, it would have been the good man. Okay, the good man. If it had been hoi agathoi, it would have been the good men, plural. But here, hi agathai, feminine, the good women. Now, what are the good women doing? Well, the good women received something. Here is a second aorist. A second aorist. Now, notice, how do I know that? Because this is from the stem lambano. And it might have been hard to recognize that if you hadn't memorized your vocabulary words. Because remember, elaban means I take or I received. I took or I received. But here, since we have a plural subject, this has got to be a plural. So it's on SN, amen eti on. It's third person, okay, plural, third person plural, and it is a second aorist. You say, well, wait a minute, I thought the on SN, amen eti on endings were imperfect endings. They are, but remember, a second aorist or an aorist can form its ending in one of two ways, by using the ending sa, sen, saman, sati, san, or they can change their stem for irregular verbs. Their stem changes, and then they use the imperfect endings to show the imperfect, or to show that they're just simply aorist. So this is a second aorist, all right? On ending, third person singular. You have a stem changer here, so therefore it's just simple past tense. So the good women received. Now, here's this. The good women received what? The good women received good things. Good things. Believe it or not, that is neuter. Aas, aan, aas, aan. Remember, for our neuter endings. Take a look at that in the book. You'll be reminded that this is the neuter and it is plural. All right, so let me sort of write those out on the board for you, those neuter endings. Remember how they go? They go on, oo, o, on, and then they go on, ois, ah. See, there it is. It's plural. It's plural, and you say, well, why isn't it this? Because basically we know the subject of our sentence already, but they know good things, and just because of the context it makes sense. So the good women received, rather, good things, and then notice here is our preposition, apa, followed by tu pistu adelphu in the genitive case, and this is our prepositional phrase right here. This is all one unit right here. All right, so apa, then followed by the genitive, means from. So they received good things from the faithful brother. From the faithful brother. Okay, notice genitive case all the way down is our prepositional phrase, apa tu pistu adelphu. All right, let's take a look at number 5 now, and let's read it out loud first. Dia, tain, doxon, tu, kuriou, ekuamen, parabalein, agapes, kai, erenes. All right, this is a familiar sentence. Number 5, if we look at it, dia is our preposition. Tain, doxon, happens to be in the accusative case, right? Ace, ain, aas, aan. Doxon is just declined with the use of the alpha, not the eta there. So you have these accusative case noun and article that follow, that accompany this preposition. So dia, when followed by a noun in the accusative case, means because of or on account of, okay? So because of or on account of what? On account of or because of the Lord, okay? Because of the Lord, the glory of the Lord, right? On account of the glory of the Lord. Now here, we do have to supply the preposition of in that instance, because there's no preposition preceding it. It's showing what glory? The glory that belongs to the Lord. So on account of the glory of the Lord, Notice, we were hearing. This is imperfect. This is imperfect, first person plural, all right? Imperfect, first person plural, active indicative, means we were hearing a parable, okay, ein, accusative case. Here's a genitive, of love, and peace, okay, and of peace. So, on account of the glory of the Lord, we were hearing a parable of love and of peace. Okay, well, we wouldn't have to supply of again. We could just say peace. Now, number 7. Epimpsin, ha, theos, angelus, eston, kosmon. All right, notice here. Epimpsin. Notice how that in this particular verb, that it goes sa, sin, samen, sate, son, right? Imperfect is on, s, in, amen, eti, on. This has a sin, like the sa, has a sin ending, so therefore it's simple aorist. So God, our subject, ha, right, nominative case. Os, u, o, on, nominative case singular. God is doing the action. He's performing the action of this verb. So therefore God sent, past tense, simple, past tense, aorist. He sent. What did he send? I need an accusative case. Here it is. Os, u, o, on, oi, on, ois, us, accusative, plural. Sent angels. Then notice ace means into, right? Into. And then here is the prepositional phrase, into the world. All right, here's accusative case. Okay, into the world. This is the object of the preposition. This is the prepositional phrase. All right, accusative case, ace means into the world. So here it is again. God sent angels into the world. Well, that's all we have time for today in terms of the sentences, but I'd like for you on your own to go through and work through as many of these as you possibly can. Check your answers at the back of the book, and we'll work through some more sentences. Perhaps we'll take more time in a lesson in the future to work through a number of these sentences so you can see a lot of these rules applied. But the main thing is that you pay attention to those prepositions. Notice how they're used in the New Testament to intensify meaning, to add color. Notice about these verbs and in terms of their tense and whether or not they're used in an ongoing fashion or if it's just in an undefined way. Notice all of the things that we've learned so far and try to use them more and more in your teaching and in your preaching and in your own personal Bible study. I appreciate so much your diligence, and I want to encourage you to keep learning. It takes a little effort. It takes a lot of effort, doesn't it? It takes a little bit of hard work. Oh, but the payoffs are great. So stay with us, keep working hard, and let's don't forget quickly now about our homework as we bring this session to a close. Notice I want you to review the vocabulary that we've learned so far. I want you to work on those sentences that I assigned you just a moment ago, and then go ahead and read chapters 9 and 10, because from here on out, we're going to try to shorten these lessons. We're not going to go in as much detail on some of the things in the future as we have in the past, as we begin to sort of move a little more quickly through the textbook on into the end of our class. Until next time, I bid you a very pleasant good day, and may God bless you richly.